Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Tuesday, April 28th. I'm Sarith Hawk. The war in Iran has had wide, sweeping impacts on our nation's economy. That includes for walnut farmers in California.
I represent 3,700 growers, many of them who are family farms, who have reached that point where they just don't know how they're going to continue to survive.
Today, we speak with the leader of the California Walnut Commission to discuss the impacts of the Iran war. But first, these headlines. A Tulare County sheriff's deputy who was killed in the line of duty earlier this month in Porterville will be laid to rest today. Deputy Randy Hoppert was killed on April 9th as he responded to a call where an eviction notice was being served. A resident at the home shot at officers and was then killed following a standoff. Hoppert died at a Porterville hospital a short time after being shot. The community had a chance to view Hoppert's body one more time on Monday night at a church in Visalia. Supporters of a billionaire tax in California say they have enough signatures to qualify the measure for the November ballot. The goal of the proposal is to generate $100 billion in revenue for the state to backfill federal cuts to Medicaid. But the idea has its critics, including tech leaders and Governor Gavin Newsom. They say it could drive the state's wealthiest residents to leave. The Secretary of State still needs to verify the signatures to qualify the measure. There are still questions surrounding a new 700-bed immigration facility in McFarland. The facility began housing detainees earlier this month. CalMatters reporter Wendy Fry says there is a set process that cities and counties are supposed to follow before approving a facility for immigration detention.
They have to provide a 180-day notice to the public. The public gets an opportunity to put community impact in the municipality wherever that facility is going to open. And they have to get certain permits from the city or the county where they're going to be operating. We can't find records of that happening before this facility opened. And, the concern here is, are they doing this in a way where the public knows where these facilities are and how they're being opened and how they're being run?
ICE told CalMatters the facility opened under an existing intergovernmental services agreement that had been in place for years. Officials in the Bay Area say they saw the first overdose death from 2 new street drugs. Safford Hemmer from our California newsroom partners KALW has more.
San Francisco's Department of Public Health issued an alert about N-desethylisotoniazine, also known as ISO and TONI, and N-propionitrile-chlorphine, also known as cyclorphine. They are both opioids that are undetectable using test strips and do not contain fentanyl. Cyclorphine is 10 times more powerful. They are found in counterfeit pills that are not manufactured by licensed pharmaceutical companies, but appear the same as the licensed version. The counterfeit pills contain varying levels of the opioids. The Department of Public Health says even one pill can be lethal. The safest approach is to use only those medications issued by a pharmacy. In San Francisco, I'm Stafford Hemmer.
Fresno State is expanding a program that guarantees admission to college students who plan to transfer to the university. 9 community colleges are now part of the so-called Bulldog Bound program. The colleges represent various counties, including Fresno, Madera, Kings, Tulare, and Merced. Under the partnership, students who meet minimum upper division requirements and apply to Fresno State are guaranteed a spot. University officials say the program helps streamline opportunities for students seeking to continue their education.
If you're waiting to buy your tickets to Corks and Brews on Sunday, May 3rd, don't. Act now. You already know you're planning to come out for a fun afternoon of tastings, music, and community, so why not check it off your to-do list and buy your tickets now? Especially our South Valley listeners in Bakersfield and Visalia. We've added a second complimentary bus to get you to and from the event, and spots are filling up fast. Reserve your seat, buy your tickets, and find answers to your frequently asked questions at kvpr.org.
And now to our main story. California's walnut industry is big business. The state's Mediterranean climate makes it ideal for growing them. It's estimated 380,000 acres of walnuts are produced in the state. Out of that, nearly 30,000 acres are in Tulare County. A majority of these nuts get shipped internationally. Farmers export roughly 65% of it to places like India, Europe, and the Middle East. And that global trade practice has brought the impacts of the war in Iran close to home. The conflict has led to a battle over the Strait of Hormuz, which is a major trade route that has been closed. That's triggered an increase in fuel prices and has also had a significant impact on California farmers. Robert Verloop is the executive director of the California Walnut Commission. I spoke with him about how the war is impacting the walnut industry and the increasing financial pressures of doing business overseas.
When the war started, we had about 400 containers on what we call on the water, right? They were being shipped that had left California, and each container is about 40,000 pounds. The closer that ships were to the Straits of Hormuz, the more challenging it became because we didn't have a whole lot of options of what we could do with those loads. And what our shippers and our processors and the shipping companies ended up doing is diverting a lot of those to other locations. Some of those maybe in the Middle East. Some of those will end up in India. We do know that there were diversions that went from anywhere from Singapore and Malaysia to China, as I said, India, Turkey, and to Europe. And when they got diverted, sometimes we lost track of them. And it took a little while for the shipping companies to let us know where those loads were. Then they had to get put on new ships and shipped to new locations, new customers, renegotiated price in some cases. And it took anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 weeks before those walnuts ended up being received by customers. So it was a kind of somewhat of a hair-raising time frame because we don't know where they'll ultimately end up. But fortunately, it appears at this point that all of those loads have been recovered and have found their way to our customers.
And this all happened within the span of the past couple months. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, no, actually what we're talking about happened since the beginning of the war started. So, and the majority of these diversions occurred within the first 2 to 3 weeks.
What have you been hearing from San Joaquin Valley walnut farmers specifically?
It's very concerning for us because this region represents 25% of our total exports. Europe being the number one market with about 48%. And so this is an extremely important market. They cherish California walnuts because of the quality. It's culturally relevant, especially during the Ramadan season. And so for us, this really sets back this momentum that we have in the marketplace. And so the result back to the growers are both impacting this year's crop. If the walnuts are not being sold, they have to be held in cold storage. Cost goes up, of the cost of goods goes up. And then at the same time, the buyers are very attuned to what's going on globally, and they're watching inventory levels. And if they feel that the inventories are too high, they try to leverage down the price. So there's an impact immediately on those shipments that were directly impacted, rather, with lower prices. Even if it's a couple of pennies here or there, that certainly starts to add up. And then the other direct impact that all of our growers are talking about is the immediate impact on the cost of farm operations. So imagine that at this time, when we're talking about March, is really when we start to see a lot of our trees start to bloom. And that also means that we've got, and this year, especially with the heat wave that we had, we needed to start our irrigation pumps earlier. That requires either gas or diesel, which are at record levels. Everybody knows that from filling up their trucks or their cars. At the same time, fertilizer costs have jumped up very significantly. And if you're a small family farm and you didn't have the resources to have tanks for your fuel or storage for your fertilizer, and you didn't buy ahead, then you're paying the current market prices, which are much higher than we had anticipated. So There is the impact on last year's crop. There's the operating cost for this year's crop that's just starting to bloom and is starting to set. And as we all know, California is known for high input costs and regulatory pressures. And while we're really good adjusting to that, and we're very efficient with our irrigation and our fertilizer practices, you get to a point where you can't cost cut yourself into profitability any longer.
Yeah, we're watching lots of uncertainty right now in the market. I want to touch briefly on some other factors that may be affecting walnut production. It was about a year ago that President Trump implemented what he called Liberation Day tariffs that impacted nearly all countries. Did this also affect the walnut industry here?
Not directly, other than maybe secondarily where there were inputs that came in with higher tariffs. But where it really has impacted us the most is on the outbound side. California and the rest of the world is charged 100% tariff on walnuts going into India. And we all have great hope for the Indian market. That's a growing population. And they're lovers of many of the products that we produce here in California, including our walnuts. We currently ship between 15 to 20,000 tons of walnuts to India, but that's under 100% tariff. And so for not only the current administration, but even previous administrations, we have been working with them to try to get a reduction from India on that tariff. And we estimate that if we can get that tariff at 0% or close to that, it could represent 100,000 tons of additional incremental sales to India.
Historically, our KVPR news team has struggled to get comments from the farm industry, especially when it comes to how they're being impacted by the Trump administration's actions, for example, tariffs. What makes you so willing to speak about these impacts?
Well, I represent 3,700 growers, many of them who are family farms, who have reached that point where they just don't know how they're going to continue to survive. And we're not complaining to the government. What we are doing, like so many other people, is fact sharing, making sure that everybody is aware of the situation, and then also explaining that we don't want to be reliant on government support. But where things are happening outside of our control, where we can no longer be any more efficient in order to be profitable because there's just no more efficiency to work on, we're in a situation now where it would be prudent for us to make sure that when and where we can have people really take an honest look at what impacts are influencing the industry. I think it behooves us to have an intelligent discussion. In some cases, it's a passionate discussion. But I think this administration has shown strong support for agriculture and farmers in a lot of other states. We certainly have seen more acknowledgement of specialty crops receiving additional funding, where in the past maybe other administrations haven't done that. So I think in general, we look towards, whether it's Washington or Sacramento, we look towards these as options to help us in very difficult situations. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we have that communication in a meaningful, factual, and in a direct way.
Robert Verloop, Executive Director of the California Walnut Commission, thanks for speaking with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
And that's today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Sarith Hawk. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Every day on Up First, NPR's Golden Globe-nominated morning news podcast, we bring you 3 essential stories. At the heart of each story are questions. What really happened? What really mattered? What happens next? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious and to follow the facts. Follow Up First wherever you get your podcasts and start your day knowing what matters and why.